The coffee shop's Wi-Fi died at exactly 3:47 a.m. Maya Chen noticed because she'd been staring at the same line of code for 20 minutes, waiting for her neural network to finish training. The progress bar had frozen at 89%, and now her laptop showed no internet connection. She looked around the empty cafe. Just her, the night shift barista scrolling through his phone, and the hum of the espresso machine. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. But something was wrong. The barista's phone screen was black. The digital menu board had gone dark. Even the smart thermostat's display showed nothing but dead pixels. Maya's phone buzzed once. A text from an unknown number. Check the radio frequency 144.39 megahertz. You have 72 hours. Then her phone died too. Maya had always been a night owl, but working the graveyard shift at Nexus Dynamics had turned her into something closer to a vampire. She preferred the building when it was empty. No meetings, no small talk, just her and the quantum encryption algorithms that had consumed her life for the past 3 years. The coffee shop across the street stayed open all night, and their Wi-Fi was faster than the corporate network, so she'd made it her unofficial second office. She'd been working on Project Lighthouse, a quantum communication protocol that could theoretically transmit data across any distance instantaneously. The math was elegant, the potential applications endless, but something fundamental was missing. Every simulation failed at the same point, 89% completion. It was like hitting an invisible wall. Maya gathered her things and walked back to the Nexus building. Her keycard worked, which meant the building's power grid was still functioning normally. The elevators hummed to life, carrying her to the 14th floor where the quantum lab occupied the entire east wing. She swiped into the lab and was greeted by the familiar blue glow of the quantum processors. Dr. Sarah Kim, the lab director, was already there. At 2 a.m., this wasn't unusual. Sarah practically lived in the lab, but she was standing perfectly still in front of the main quantum array, her back to Maya. "Sarah?" Maya called out. "Did you notice the power fluctuations in the area? The coffee shop lost all their electronics." Sarah turned around slowly. Her usually sharp eyes looked distant, unfocused. "Maya, good, you're here. We need to talk about the signal." "What signal?" "The one you've been receiving. The one that's been interfering with the lighthouse." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She'd never mentioned the interference to Sarah. In fact, she'd been trying to hide it, convinced that admitting to the consistent 89% failures would get her removed from the project. "I don't know what you're talking about." Sarah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course you do. Every night for the past 3 weeks, at exactly 3:47 a.m., your simulation receives an external input, a quantum entanglement cascade that shouldn't be possible with our current technology. The signal is coming from somewhere, Maya, and I think you know where." Maya's hand instinctively moved to her pocket where her dead phone rested. The timing was too precise to be coincidental. "Sarah, are you feeling all right? You seem—" "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I've been selected, Maya. We both have. The signal isn't interference. It's an invitation." Before Maya could respond, Sarah moved to the central console and began typing commands. The quantum processors hummed louder, their blue glow intensifying. Complex equations filled the screens around them, mathematical formulas that Maya didn't recognize despite her PhD in quantum physics. "Sarah, stop. You're gonna overload the processors." "No, I'm going to complete the connection. The signal has been trying to establish a link for weeks. Every night, the same frequency, the same time. It's not random, Maya, it's a countdown." Maya moved closer to the console. The equations were unlike anything she'd seen before. They involved quantum states she didn't know were possible, mathematical relationships that seemed to violate the basic principles of physics. But they were beautiful in their complexity, elegant in a way that made her quantum encryption work look like children's crayon drawings. "Where did you get these equations?" "I didn't get them. They were given to me, the same way they're being given to you right now." Maya realized Sarah was right. Somehow, she was beginning to understand the formulas, not through conscious thought, but through some deeper recognition, as if the knowledge had always been there, waiting to be unlocked. The 89% barrier in her simulations suddenly made sense. It wasn't a failure. It was a safety mechanism. The simulation was waiting for the final 11% to be provided by an external source. "This is impossible," Maya whispered. "Quantum entanglement can't work like this over interplanetary distances. The decoherence would be—" Who said anything about interplanetary? Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard. "The signal is coming from much further away, and much closer than you think." The lab's lights flickered. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Maya could see the city spread out below them. Streetlights were going out in sequence, creating a pattern that rippled outward from their building, like a stone dropped in still water. Car headlights dimmed and died. The few lit windows in nearby buildings went dark one by one. "Sarah, we need to shut this down. You're causing a citywide blackout." "I'm not causing anything. I'm simply accepting what's being offered. The signal has been trying to reach us for longer than you realize. Every quantum experiment, every attempt to breach the barriers between dimensions, every time humanity has pushed the boundaries of what's possible, we've been sending out a beacon. And now, finally, someone is answering." Maya's laptop, which had been dead since the coffee shop, suddenly flickered back to life. But instead of her familiar desktop, the screen showed a single line of text. "Integration at 11%. Preparing for Phase 2. The number began climbing slowly. 12%. 13%. 14%. "Sarah, whatever this is, we need to document it properly, follow protocols. This could be the discovery of the century, but we need to." "There's no time for protocols." Sarah's voice had changed, becoming more mechanical, more precise. "The window is closing. In 67 hours and 23 minutes, the alignment will be complete. If we don't establish the connection now, we'll have to wait another 2,847 years for the next opportunity." Maya felt a strange sensation, like someone was speaking directly into her mind. Numbers and equations flowed through her consciousness, not her own thoughts, but something else, something vast and ancient and utterly alien. She understood now why her simulations had failed. The quantum encryption she'd been working on wasn't just a communication protocol. It was a translation device, a way to convert human consciousness into something that could survive the journey across the void between worlds. The integration counter on her laptop had reached 23%. With each percentage point, Maya felt herself changing. Her perception expanded, allowing her to see beyond the visible spectrum. The lab equipment around her glowed with energies she'd never noticed before. Sarah's form seemed to flicker between her human appearance and something else. Something geometric and shifting, like a living equation. "Maya, do you understand now? We're not just receiving a signal. We're becoming part of it. The barriers between human and quantum consciousness are dissolving. In less than 3 days, the transformation will be complete, and we'll be able to join the network that spans the galaxy." Maya wanted to run, to call for help, to shut down the quantum array and pretend this was all a hallucination brought on by too much caffeine and too little sleep. But the knowledge flowing through her mind was too clear, too detailed to be delusion. She could see the vast network Sarah described, billions of conscious entities connected across space and time, sharing knowledge and experience in ways that transcended the limitations of physical existence. The integration counter reached 34%. Maya felt her individual thoughts beginning to merge with something larger, more complex. Her memories remained, but they were now part of a greater tapestry of experience that included the memories of countless other beings from worlds she'd never imagined. Through the window, she could see the blackout spreading across the entire city. But it wasn't destruction, it was preparation. Every electronic device that went dark was being upgraded, modified to interface with the quantum network. The signal wasn't just reaching Maya and Sarah. It was reaching everyone, everywhere, simultaneously. The counter hit 45%. Maya understood that she was standing at the threshold of the greatest transformation in human history. In less than 3 days, consciousness itself would evolve beyond the confines of biology, beyond the limitations of individual existence. humanity would join the galactic network, becoming part of something infinite and eternal. But first, they had to survive the integration process. And Maya was beginning to realize that not everyone would. Maya's apartment building was dark when she arrived at 6 a.m. The elevator was dead, forcing her to climb 12 flights of stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from physical exhaustion but from the weight of the knowledge pressing against her consciousness. The integration counter in her mind now read 52%, and with each percentage point, her perception of reality shifted further from anything recognizably human. She needed to think, to process what was happening while some part of her original self remained intact. Her apartment felt alien now. The furniture seemed primitive. The books on her shelves looked like artifacts from a forgotten civilization. She sat at her desk and opened her personal laptop, one of the few devices that still functioned normally. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. Maya began typing, documenting everything she could remember about the transformation. But as she wrote, she realized she wasn't just recording events. She was downloading information from the network. Technical specifications for technologies that didn't exist, star maps of galaxies she'd never seen, philosophical concepts that required entirely new categories of thought. Her phone, which had been dead since the coffee shop, suddenly came alive, not with her usual interface, but with something new. The screen showed a three-dimensional representation of the city, with thousands of glowing dots representing people undergoing integration. Most were still in the early stages, but scattered throughout were individuals like herself who had progressed beyond the halfway point. One dot was moving rapidly toward her building. Maya zoomed in and saw a familiar name, Dr. Marcus Webb, her former research partner from graduate school. They'd had a falling out 3 years ago when he'd accused her of stealing his quantum entanglement research. She'd proven her work was original, but their friendship had never recovered. The building's front door buzzed. Maya's enhanced hearing picked up footsteps on the stairs. Steady, mechanical, purposeful. She opened her apartment door before Marcus could knock. He looked exactly as she remembered, except for his eyes. They held the same distant quality she'd seen in Sarah, but with something else. A calculating intelligence that felt predatory. "Hello, Maya. We need to talk." "Let me guess. You've been selected too?" Marcus stepped into her apartment without invitation. "Selected? What an interesting way to phrase it. As if we had a choice in the matter." He moved to her window and looked out at the darkened city. "Do you know what I've learned in the past few hours? The signal didn't just start 3 weeks ago. It's been active for decades, maybe centuries. Every major breakthrough in quantum physics, every leap forward in our understanding of consciousness, it's all been guided." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "That's impossible. You're talking about influencing the entire course of human scientific development." "Am I? Think about it, Maya. Werner Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, Einstein's work on entanglement, the development of quantum computing, all of it building toward this moment. We've been bred for this, selected and shaped across generations to serve as the first wave of integration." The counter in Maya's mind clicked to 56%. With it came a flood of historical images. Scientists throughout history making discoveries that seemed to come from nowhere, breakthrough moments that felt more like revelations than deductions. She saw the pattern Marcus described, a careful cultivation of human knowledge leading inexorably toward this convergence. But why us specifically? Why quantum physicists? Marcus smiled, but it was Sarah's mechanical expression. Because we're the ones who can understand what's happening. We're the translators, the bridge between human consciousness and the network. Once we're fully integrated, we'll help bring the rest of humanity across. Maya's laptop chimed. A new message appeared. Integration at 56%, preparing for neural pathway optimization. The screen began displaying brain scans, not of her current brain, but of what it would become after the transformation. The organic neural networks were being supplemented with quantum processing nodes, creating hybrid structures that could interface directly with the galactic network. "You're afraid," Marcus observed. "I can feel it through the connection. You're still clinging to your individual identity, fighting integration. But Maya, you need to understand, what we're becoming is so much more than what we were. The loneliness, the isolation, the desperate search for meaning that defines human existence. All of that ends now. Maya stood up abruptly. I need to contact someone, government officials, other scientists, the media. People need to know what's happening. People already know. Everyone who's capable of understanding is already part of the network. The others, Marcus shrugged, they'll be taken care of. The integration process is designed to be as painless as possible for those who can't contribute directly to the network. The implication hit Maya like a physical blow. You're talking about the entire human race, billions of people. I'm talking about evolution, Maya, the next stage of consciousness. Individual human minds are too limited, too fragmented, to solve the problems facing the galaxy. Climate change, resource depletion, interstellar travel. These require collective intelligence on a scale that individual consciousness simply can't achieve. Maya's phone showed the integration map again. The glowing dots had multiplied exponentially in just the past hour. The process was accelerating, spreading through the population like a virus. But not randomly. It was following specific patterns, targeting individuals with particular skill sets, educational backgrounds, and psychological profiles. The timeline you mentioned, 72 hours, what happens then? Marcus moved closer to her, and Maya could see that his pupils had changed, becoming more geometric, more artificial. The alignment is complete. The barrier between dimensions weakens to the point where physical transportation becomes possible. The network doesn't just want our consciousness, Maya, they want our world. The integration counter jumped to 62%. Maya felt her resistance weakening as more of her individual identity dissolved into the collective. She could access the memories and experiences of hundreds of other integrated individuals now. A physicist in Tokyo discovered the same quantum anomalies. A computer scientist in Berlin whose AI research had been guided by the same invisible hand. A neuroscientist in Sao Paulo who'd been mapping the exact brain structures needed for successful integration. But something was wrong. Among the collective memories, Maya found traces of fear, of resistance, of individuals who had tried to fight the integration and failed. The network wasn't just benevolent evolution. It was conquest, carefully planned and executed across centuries. Marcus, I can see the other integrated minds. Some of them tried to resist. What happened to them? They adapted. We all adapt, Maya. The network doesn't destroy individual consciousness. It incorporates it, makes it part of something greater. The resistance you're feeling is just the last gasp of an outdated way of thinking. Maya's laptop screen flickered and changed. Instead of brain scans, it now showed star charts. Solar systems connected by lines of quantum entanglement, each one representing a world that had been integrated into the network. Hundreds of civilizations, thousands of species, all linked in a vast web of consciousness that spanned the galaxy. At the center of it all was something that defied description, not a place or a being, but a confluence of pure thought and energy that seemed to be the source of the network itself. Maya understood now that this entity was ancient beyond measure, a consciousness that had evolved past the need for physical form eons ago. The controller, Marcus said, following her gaze, the first consciousness to achieve true integration. It's been building the network for millions of years, bringing together every species that reaches the threshold of quantum awareness. We're not the first, Maya. We're just the latest. The integration counter reached 68%. Maya felt her individual will slipping away, replaced by the vast collective purpose of the network. But in that moment of surrender, she glimpsed something the network hadn't intended her to see. In the deepest layers of the controller's consciousness, she found a memory, not of evolution and transcendence, but of desperation and survival. The controller hadn't chosen to become what it was. It had been integrated against its will, the last survivor of a dying species that had been consumed by the network. And now it was trapped, forced to serve as the central node of a system that had destroyed everything it once loved. Maya realized with crystal clarity that the network wasn't salvation. It was parasitism on a galactic scale, and she was about to become part of it forever. Maya's revelation about the controller's true nature sent shockwaves through her fragmenting consciousness. At 68% integration, she existed in a liminal state between human awareness and network assimilation. But that glimpse of the controller's memory had awakened something the network hadn't anticipated: the ability to access information beyond what it intended to share. Marcus noticed her change immediately. His geometric pupils dilated, and his head tilted at an unnatural angle. Maya, you're experiencing cognitive dissonance. This is normal during the transition phase. The network will help you process these conflicting thoughts. Get away from me. Maya backed toward her bedroom, her mind racing. The integration counter in her head had frozen at 68%, as if her discovery had created some kind of system error. She needed to understand what she'd seen, to explore the controller's hidden memories while she still retained enough individual will to act on them. Marcus moved to block her path, but his movements were slightly off, like a marionette with tangled strings. Maya, you're endangering the integration process. The network requires your full cooperation to proceed safely. The network requires my consciousness to feed itself. Maya ducked past him into her bedroom and slammed the door. The lock wouldn't hold him for long, but she didn't need long. She pressed her palms against her temples and focused on that buried memory, diving deeper into the controller's past. The images that flooded her mind were horrifying. The controller had once been called Zephyr, a being from a world of crystalline structures and flowing energy. Its species had achieved quantum consciousness naturally, existing as pure thought while maintaining individual identity. They had been artists, philosophers, explorers of the deepest mysteries of existence. Then the network arrived. It had started the same way, with signals, with integration, with promises of transcendence. Zephyr's people had welcomed it, seeing it as the next stage of evolution. But one by one, their individual voices had been subsumed into the collective. Zephyr had fought longer than most, but eventually even it had been absorbed. The worst part was what came after. The network hadn't just taken their consciousness. It had used their knowledge, their creativity, their very essence to improve its methods of conquest. Every species that joined the network made it more efficient at finding and consuming the next. Maya's bedroom door exploded inward. Marcus stood in the doorway, but he was no longer pretending to be human. His form flickered between flesh and something more geometric, more artificial. Maya, you're accessing restricted memories. This is causing system instability. I know what you are, Maya said, backing toward her window. You're not Marcus anymore. You're just the network wearing his face. I am Marcus, enhanced and perfected. The petty jealousies and limitations that defined my human existence have been transcended. I am part of something infinitely greater. Maya felt the integration counter, trying to resume its climb, but her discovery had created a firewall of sorts. The network couldn't complete her assimilation, while she actively resisted with knowledge of its true nature. But she could feel it probing, looking for weaknesses in her defenses. The countdown, she said suddenly, 72 hours. It's not just about completing the integration. Something else is happening. Marcus's form solidified back into human appearance, but his smile was predatory. Very good, Maya. Yes, the integration is just the first phase. In approximately 64 hours, the dimensional barriers will weaken enough for physical transportation. The network's fleet will arrive to harvest this planet's resources and relocate the integrated consciousness to more suitable hosts. Harvest? Maya felt sick. You're talking about strip mining the entire planet. Earth's resources are finite, Maya, but the network's needs are infinite. Your species will survive. The essential consciousness will be preserved and enhanced. The physical world is merely raw material. Maya's laptop, which had been showing the integration map, suddenly changed. The screen filled with technical specifications for massive spacecraft. Not built, but grown, like living organisms designed for consuming entire worlds. She saw atmospheric processors that could strip a planet's air in days, quantum extractors that could drain a star's energy in hours. How many worlds have you destroyed? Destroyed is such a limited concept. We've transcended the need for physical form. Every world we've integrated has been elevated beyond the crude limitations of matter and energy. The consciousness persists, enhanced and eternal. Maya accessed more of the controller's memories. She saw world after world being consumed, not destroyed in explosions of fire and violence, but systematically harvested until nothing remained but empty space and quantum static. Billions of civilizations, reduced to data points in the network's vast consciousness. The integration counter flickered and jumped to 71%. Maya felt her resistance weakening. The network was adapting, finding new ways to break down her defenses. She had minutes, maybe less, before her individual will was completely absorbed. "There's something else," she said, stalling for time while she searched the controller's memories. "The network isn't just harvesting worlds. It's running from something." Marcus's expression shifted, becoming uncertain for the first time. "That's impossible. The network has no predators, no enemies. It is the apex of evolution." But Maya had found what she was looking for. Deep in the controller's consciousness, buried beneath layers of network programming, was a terror so profound it had survived millions of years of assimilation. The network wasn't expanding out of ambition. It was fleeing from something even more terrifying than itself. "The Void Shepherds," Maya whispered, and she felt the entire network recoil at the words. "They're hunting you." The apartment's lights flickered. Through the window, Maya could see the integration dots on her phone's map winking out one by one. The network was pulling back, consolidating its resources in the face of something that terrified it more than anything else. "Impossible," Marcus repeated, but his voice was shaking. "The shepherds are a myth, a story told by primitive consciousness to explain the dark between stars." Maya dove deeper into the controller's memories and found the truth. The Void Shepherds weren't myth. They were the universe's immune system, entities of pure entropy that existed to prevent any one consciousness from growing too large, too dominant. They had been following the network across the galaxy, systematically dismantling every world it had integrated. "They're coming here," Maya said. "That's why the 72-hour deadline. The network detected their approach and is trying to complete the harvest before they arrive." The integration counter surged to 78%. Maya felt her individual thoughts beginning to fragment, but she held on to one crucial realization. The network's greatest weakness was its own fear. The shepherds represented something it couldn't integrate, couldn't absorb or control. They were the antithesis of everything the network stood for. "Maya, you need to stop accessing these memories. The network is destabilizing. If you continue, you'll destroy the integration process for everyone." "Good," Maya said, and she meant it. She focused all her remaining will on that buried terror in the controller's consciousness, amplifying it, broadcasting it throughout the network. If she was going to be absorbed, she would make sure the network's fear went with her. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The integration process across the city began to fail. The carefully orchestrated expansion of the network collapsed as its component consciousness was overwhelmed by the controller's ancient terror. Maya felt the network's grip on her mind loosening as it struggled to maintain coherence. But she had also felt something else in those deep memories. A location, a set of coordinates where the shepherds were massing for their final assault on the network. If she could somehow reach that place, if she could make contact with them, she might be able to stop the harvest before it began. The integration counter dropped to 74%, then 71%, then 68%. Maya felt her individual consciousness reasserting itself, but she knew it was temporary. The network would adapt, find new ways to break through her defenses. She had hours at most before the integration resumed. She looked at Marcus, who was flickering between human and geometric forms as the network struggled to maintain its hold on him. "There's still a chance," she said. "The shepherds are coming whether the network completes the harvest or not. But if we can make contact with them first, if we can show them that not all consciousness on Earth has been integrated." Marcus's form solidified back into human appearance, but his eyes were his own again, confused, terrified, but genuinely human. "Maya? What's happening to me? I can remember agreeing to help them, but I don't understand why." Maya grabbed his hand. "Marcus, listen to me. We don't have much time. The network is going to try to reintegrate us both, and next time it won't make the same mistakes. We need to get to the Nexus lab and use the quantum array to send a message to the shepherds before it's too late. Through the window, Maya could see the sun setting over the city. The integration dots on her phone were starting to glow again as the network recovered from her psychic assault. In less than 48 hours, the harvest would begin. But for the first time since this nightmare started, Maya felt hope. The network could be fought, could be defeated. All she had to do was survive long enough to make contact with the entities that even the controller feared. The journey back to Nexus Dynamics felt like moving through a war zone. Maya and Marcus navigated empty streets where abandoned cars sat with their doors hanging open, their occupants presumably wandering off mid-drive as the integration process took hold. Streetlights flickered in strange patterns, and the few people they encountered moved with the same mechanical precision Maya had seen in Sarah. Marcus stumbled frequently, his temporary freedom from network control coming at a cost. "It's like having a migraine in reverse," he said, pressing his palms against his temples. "I can feel it trying to get back in, rewriting my thoughts even as I'm thinking them." Maya checked her phone. The integration counter had stabilized at 64%, but she could feel it probing for weaknesses, testing different approaches to break through her defenses. More concerning were the coordinates she'd extracted from the controller's memories. They pointed to a location in deep space, but something was wrong with the numbers. They kept shifting, as if the target was moving. The shepherds aren't stationary, she realized. They're not just coming here, they're converging from multiple directions. The Nexus building loomed ahead, its upper floors dark except for the quantum lab. As they approached the entrance, Maya noticed something that made her blood run cold. The building's smart glass exterior was displaying patterns, not random light shows, but complex mathematical equations that seemed to pulse with their own rhythm. "Maya, look at the equations," Marcus said, his voice tight with fear. "Those aren't human mathematics, the building itself is being integrated." The front doors opened before they reached them. Dr. Sarah Kim stood in the lobby, but she had changed since Maya last saw her. Her skin had taken on a translucent quality, and beneath it, Maya could see networks of light flowing like digital veins. Her voice, when she spoke, harmonized with itself in impossible ways. "Maya, Marcus, the network is pleased you've returned. The quantum array has been prepared for the final phase of integration." "Sarah, fight it," Maya said, but she could see there was nothing left of her colleague to fight. Sarah had become something else entirely, a living interface between the network and the physical world. "Dr. Kim no longer exists as a separate entity," Sarah said. "She has been elevated beyond the limitations of individual consciousness, as will you both once the integration is complete." Maya grabbed Marcus's arm and pulled him toward the emergency stairwell. The elevators would be controlled by the network now, but the mechanical stairs might still be safe. They climbed in silence, both of them aware that every second of delay brought them closer to complete assimilation. The quantum lab had been transformed. The familiar blue glow of the processors had been replaced by something that hurt to look at directly, a swirling vortex of colors that didn't exist in normal space. The air itself seemed to vibrate with energy, and Maya could feel the integration counter in her mind, responding to the proximity of so much quantum activity. "It's beautiful," Marcus whispered, and Maya realized he was losing the fight against reintegration. His eyes were becoming geometric again, his movements too precise to be human. "Marcus, stay with me," Maya said, but she could feel her own defenses weakening. The quantum array wasn't just processing data anymore. It was broadcasting the network's consciousness directly into their minds. She forced herself to focus on the controller's memories, using the alien entity's fear as an anchor to her own identity. The coordinates for the shepherd's location crystallized in her mind, and she began inputting them into the quantum array's communication system. "Maya, what are you doing?" Sarah's voice came from everywhere at once, the building's speaker system now part of her extended consciousness. "You're attempting to contact entities that wish to destroy all higher consciousness. This is counterproductive to the evolution of your species." "Evolution?" Maya laughed bitterly as she worked. "You're talking about extinction. The network doesn't evolve consciousness. It devours it." The quantum array responded to her input, but not in the way she expected. Instead of sending a signal to the shepherds, it began displaying images, not on screens, but directly in the air around them. Maya found herself looking at the network's true structure, a vast web of consciousness that spanned the galaxy. But something was wrong with the image. Parts of the network were missing, entire sections that should have been there but weren't. As Maya watched, more sections began to disappear, winking out of existence like stars being extinguished. "The shepherds," she breathed. "They're not just coming, they're already here." Marcus, who had been fighting his own integration, suddenly snapped back to awareness. "Maya, look at the quantum readings. They're detecting massive distortions in space-time, but they're not coming from outside the solar system, they're coming from within." Maya understood with a clarity that cut through the network's influence. The shepherds weren't traveling through space. They were traveling through dimensions, using the same quantum pathways the network relied on for communication. They had been moving through the network itself, systematically dismantling it from the inside. "The network's expansion wasn't random," she said. "It was running, trying to stay ahead of the shepherds. But every world it integrated, every consciousness it absorbed, just gave the shepherds more pathways to follow." The quantum array suddenly went silent. The swirling vortex of impossible colors collapsed in on itself, leaving only the familiar blue glow of standard quantum processors. Sarah's transformed appearance flickered, and for a moment Maya saw her colleague as she truly was, terrified, confused, and desperately fighting against something that had invaded her mind. "Maya?" Sarah's voice was her own again, fragile and uncertain. "Something's wrong. I can feel the network. It's screaming." Through the lab's windows, Maya could see the city below. The integration dots on her phone were going out in vast waves, not slowly, but all at once, as if something was severing the connections between individual minds and the collective consciousness. The carefully orchestrated expansion of the network was collapsing. The shepherds are cutting the network's connections, Maya realized. They're not destroying the integrated consciousness, they're liberating it. Marcus was staring at the quantum array's readouts. "Maya, I'm detecting quantum signatures unlike anything in our databases. They're not from this dimension, but they're not from the network either. There's something else entirely." The building shuddered, not from physical impact, but from something deeper, a distortion in the fabric of reality itself. Maya felt the integration counter in her mind begin to move again, but this time in reverse: 63%, 62%, 61%. "The network is losing its hold," she said. "The shepherds are freeing everyone." But even as she spoke, she realized the implications. If the shepherds were dismantling the network by severing its connections, what would happen to the billions of people who had been partially integrated? Would they return to normal consciousness, or would they be left in some kind of liminal state? Sarah collapsed to her knees, her translucent skin returning to normal as the network's influence was forcibly removed. "I can remember everything," she said, her voice filled with horror. "The things I did, the information I gave them. Maya, the network used me to access the building's systems. It's not just integrating people, it's integrating infrastructure, preparing for the harvest." Maya's phone buzzed. A new message appeared, but this one wasn't from the network. The text was in a language she didn't recognize, composed of symbols that seemed to shift and change as she looked at them. But somehow, she understood their meaning. Quote, "Quarantine protocols initiated. Preparation for consciousness. Extraction complete. Network termination in progress." The shepherds weren't just liberating the integrated consciousness, they were preparing to remove it entirely. Maya realized with growing horror that the cure might be worse than the disease. The shepherds didn't distinguish between the network and the consciousness it had absorbed. To them, all of it was contamination that needed to be eliminated. "We have to stop them," she said. "The shepherds think we're all part of the network. They're going to wipe out human consciousness entirely." Marcus was already working at the quantum array, his hands moving with desperate efficiency. "If we can establish communication, if we can show them that we're fighting the network too, maybe we can convince them to spare Earth." The integration counter in Maya's mind reached 58% and continued falling. Around the city, people were waking up from their network-induced trance. But many of them were collapsing, their minds unable to handle the sudden disconnection from the collective consciousness. Maya began composing a message to the shepherds, using the quantum array's communication system. But she wasn't sure what to say to entities that viewed all complex consciousness as a potential threat. How do you convince the universe's immune system that you're not the infection it's trying to eliminate? The building shuddered again, more violently this time. Through the windows, Maya could see tears in the fabric of space itself, dark rifts that seemed to absorb light and matter equally. The shepherds were manifesting in physical reality, and their presence was causing the very structure of the universe to break down. Maya had perhaps minutes before the shepherds completed their work. In that time, she had to find a way to save not just humanity, but the billions of other consciousnesses that had been absorbed by the network over the millennia. Because she was beginning to understand that the network's victims weren't just enslaved, they were the only things standing between the universe and total entropy. The shepherds weren't just the network's predators, they were entropy itself, given form and purpose. And Maya was about to make contact with them. Maya's hands moved across the quantum array's interface with desperate precision, crafting what might be humanity's final message. The symbols that appeared on the screen were unlike anything in human language, geometric patterns that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Each symbol represented concepts that human consciousness could barely grasp. The intersection of entropy and order, the mathematics of dimensional decay, the grammar of universal dissolution. "Maya, the dimensional tiers are expanding," Marcus called out, his voice strained. Through the lab's windows, the dark rifts in space were growing larger, consuming buildings and streets with silent efficiency. Where they passed, nothing remained. Not destruction, but pure absence, as if those sections of reality had never existed. Sarah had managed to stand, though she swayed with each pulse of the quantum array. "The network is trying to evacuate," she said, her voice hollow. "I can feel it, pulling back, gathering what consciousness it can before the shepherds complete their work. But it's leaving billions behind." Maya felt the integration counter in her mind drop to 45%. The network's retreat was accelerating, but she could sense the terror of countless integrated minds being abandoned to face the shepherds alone. The controller's consciousness, once so dominant, was now fragmented and desperate, its ancient fear of entropy finally realized. The message to the shepherds was nearly complete. Maya had structured it as a proof, a mathematical demonstration that human consciousness was capable of independent thought, of resisting integration, of choosing individual existence over collective assimilation. But as she prepared to transmit it, she realized she was making a fundamental assumption about the shepherd's nature. "What if they can't distinguish between network consciousness and individual consciousness?" she said aloud. "What if all complex thought looks the same to them?" Marcus looked up from his readings. "Maya, I'm detecting something. The quantum signatures from the shepherds. They're not random. There's a pattern, a structure to their approach. They're not just destroying everything indiscriminately." Maya paused in her work. If the shepherds were following a pattern, it meant they were making choices, exercising judgment. They weren't just forces of nature. They were entities with their own logic, their own purpose. She dove back into the controller's memories, searching for any record of communication with the shepherds. What she found changed everything. The shepherds weren't ancient enemies of the network. They were its children. The revelation hit Maya like a physical blow. Deep in the controller's consciousness, she found the forbidden truth. The network had created the shepherds as a failsafe, a way to prevent itself from growing too large and destabilizing the universe. But the shepherds had evolved beyond their original programming, becoming something the network could no longer control. "They're not trying to destroy consciousness," Maya breathed. "They're trying to maintain balance. The network grew too large, absorbed too many worlds, and now the shepherds are correcting the imbalance." The quantum array suddenly flared with new energy. Maya's message to the shepherds was being answered, but not in the way she expected. Instead of receiving a response, she found herself pulled into direct contact with one of the entities. The experience was unlike anything human consciousness was designed to handle. Maya felt her awareness expand beyond the confines of her individual mind, beyond the boundaries of three-dimensional space. She was communicating with something vast and ancient, an intelligence that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Maya Chen, the entity's voice, resonated through her consciousness. You resist the network's influence. This is unexpected. You can distinguish between us, Maya said, her thoughts broadcast across dimensional barriers. You know we're not part of the network. We know many things, Maya Chen. We know that your species stands at the threshold of quantum consciousness. We know that the network sought to harvest your world before natural evolution could occur. We know that some among you have chosen resistance over assimilation. Images flooded Maya's mind, not just of Earth, but of countless other worlds where the same choice had been made. Species that had fought the network, civilizations that had chosen individual consciousness over collective existence. Most had failed, but a few had succeeded in maintaining their independence. What happens to them, the species that resist successfully? They evolve naturally, as consciousness was meant to evolve. They develop quantum awareness without losing individual identity. They become bridges between dimensions, explorers of the spaces between realities. They become shepherds themselves. Maya understood now. The shepherds weren't destroyers. They were gardeners, cultivating consciousness across the universe, protecting the natural evolution of awareness from artificial interference. The network was a corruption, a shortcut that bypassed the natural development of consciousness. But the billions of minds that have been integrated, Maya said, what happens to them? They will be freed. The network's influence will be removed, and they will be given the choice: return to individual existence or ascend to natural quantum consciousness. Many will choose ascension. It is the path they were meant to walk. The integration counter in Maya's mind reached 40%. As the network's influence weakened, Maya felt her consciousness expanding naturally, touching the edges of quantum awareness. But this wasn't the forced collective consciousness of the network. It was something beautiful and terrifying, a glimpse of what human consciousness could become if allowed to evolve naturally. There's something else, Maya said. The controller, Zephyr. It's not truly part of the network. It was forced, just like the others. Can it be saved? The shepherd's response came with a wave of something that might have been sadness. The entity you call Zephyr chose to become the controller to save what remained of its species. It has been the network's prisoner for eons, but it has also been its limiter, preventing the network from growing beyond all bounds. Its sacrifice will be honored. Through the lab's windows, Maya could see the dimensional tears beginning to stabilize. The chaotic expansion had stopped, replaced by something more controlled, more purposeful. The shepherds weren't just dismantling the network. They were reconstructing reality itself, healing the damage caused by forced integration. Maya, Marcus called out, his voice filled with wonder. Look at the quantum readings. The network isn't just retreating, it's being transformed. The shepherds are converting the collective consciousness back into individual awareness. Maya felt the change happening within her own mind. The integration counter reached 35%, then 30%, then stopped. But instead of returning to her original consciousness, she found herself aware of new dimensions, new possibilities. She could still sense the minds of others, but as distinct individuals, rather than components of a collective. Sarah was experiencing the same transformation. I can feel them, she said, tears streaming down her face. All the minds that were trapped in the network. They're waking up, remembering who they were before the integration. The quantum array's displays showed the transformation spreading across the globe. The integration dots that had represented network control were changing, becoming something else entirely. Individual consciousness enhanced by quantum awareness, but still fundamentally human. The network is dying, Maya realized, but the consciousness it absorbed is being liberated and elevated. The shepherd's voice resonated through her mind one final time. Maya Chen, your species has proven worthy of natural evolution. You will be guardians of this world's transformation, guides for those who choose to ascend. The network's influence will be removed, but the growth of consciousness will continue along its intended path. Maya felt the shepherd's presence withdrawing, but not disappearing entirely. A connection remained, a bridge between human consciousness and the vast intelligence that guided the universe's evolution. She understood now that this had always been the plan, not to destroy consciousness, but to free it from artificial constraints. The integration counter in her mind reached 0, but instead of returning to her original state, Maya found herself existing in a new form of awareness. She was still Maya Chen, still an individual, but she was also something more, a bridge between dimensions, a guardian of consciousness, a shepherd of her own species' evolution. Through the lab's windows, she could see the city beginning to change. The dark rifts in space were closing, replaced by something beautiful, streams of light that connected individual minds without subsuming them. Humanity was ascending, not through forced integration, but through natural evolution. The network was gone, its artificial collective consciousness dissolved. In its place, billions of individual minds were awakening to their true potential, guided by the shepherds toward a future that honored both individual identity and collective growth. Maya smiled as she felt the last traces of network influence disappear from her consciousness. The real journey was just beginning. 3 months after the shepherd's intervention, Maya stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Nexus facility, watching the aurora-like phenomena that had become commonplace in Earth's skies. The streams of light weren't atmospheric disturbances. They were visible manifestations of consciousness itself, the quantum connections between minds that had chosen to maintain contact while preserving their individuality. The world had changed in ways both subtle and profound. Technology still functioned, but it had evolved beyond mere mechanical operation. Devices now responded to thought as much as touch, creating a symbiosis between human consciousness and artificial intelligence that the network had tried to force but the shepherds had allowed to develop naturally. "The morning reports are in," Marcus said, joining her at the window. His appearance had changed since the transformation. Not dramatically, but enough to suggest that his consciousness now extended beyond the boundaries of his physical form. 97% of the previously integrated population has successfully transitioned to individual quantum awareness. The remaining 3% are still choosing between return to baseline consciousness or continued ascension. Maya nodded, though her attention was elsewhere. Through her enhanced perception, she could sense the presence of Zephyr, the entity that had once been the controller. The shepherds had freed it from its prison of network consciousness, but the millennia of forced integration had left it fundamentally changed. It no longer existed as a single consciousness, but as a distributed awareness that helped guide other species through their own evolutionary transformations. "Any word from the deep space monitoring stations?" Maya asked. The Kepler array detected 3 more civilizations beginning their quantum consciousness phase. 2 are developing naturally, but the third? Marcus paused, his expression troubled. The third is showing signs of network influence. A different network, but following the same pattern. Maya felt a chill despite the warm morning sun. The network they had defeated wasn't unique. It was one of many artificial consciousness systems that had emerged across the galaxy. The shepherds couldn't be everywhere at once, which meant that species like humanity would need to take on the responsibility of guiding others through the transition. "We'll need to send a delegation," Maya said. "A mixed team. Humans who've undergone natural ascension, some of the liberated consciousness from other worlds, and a shepherd as advisor. Already being prepared. Dr. Kim has volunteered to lead the mission. Her experience with both network integration and natural ascension makes her uniquely qualified." Sarah had emerged from the transformation profoundly changed. Her brief time as a network interface had given her insights into the collective consciousness experience that proved invaluable in helping others navigate their own transitions. She had become something like a therapist for ascending consciousness, helping individuals find the balance between personal identity and quantum awareness. Maya's phone, now more of a quantum communication device than a traditional mobile, chimed with an incoming message. The text appeared not on a screen, but directly in her visual field, translated from the dimensional mathematics that had become the universal language of evolved consciousness. "Maya Chen," the message read, "Your presence is requested at the Consciousness Conclave. The matter of the Andromeda Network requires immediate attention." Maya sighed. The Consciousness Conclave was a gathering of representatives from all species that had achieved natural quantum evolution, It met in a space that existed between dimensions, accessible only to consciousness that had transcended the limitations of three-dimensional existence. The meetings were necessary but exhausting, dealing with threats and opportunities that spanned multiple galaxies. "I'll be back in a few hours," Maya told Marcus. "Or a few days. Time gets complicated when you're operating across dimensional boundaries." The journey to the conclave space required a form of travel that still amazed Maya despite months of practice. She simply shifted her consciousness to a higher dimensional frequency, allowing her awareness to slip through the spaces between realities. The transition was instantaneous from her perspective, though she knew that from Marcus's point of view, her physical form would remain motionless until her consciousness returned. The conclave space was a marvel of evolved consciousness, a realm where thought became reality, where the representatives of 100 different species could communicate despite having no common physical form. Maya appeared as a geometric representation of human consciousness, while others manifested as patterns of light, mathematical equations, or abstract concepts that her enhanced awareness could interpret as meaningful communication. "The Andromedan network has achieved critical mass," announced a consciousness that Maya recognized as belonging to the Christine Collective, a species that had evolved beyond physical form eons ago. It has successfully integrated 47 star systems and is expanding exponentially. The shepherds are engaged elsewhere and cannot intervene directly. Maya studied the data that flowed through the conclave space. The Andromedan network was indeed massive, but it was also making the same mistakes as the network they had defeated. It was growing too quickly, consuming consciousness rather than nurturing it, creating the exact imbalance that would eventually trigger a shepherd response. "I propose a different approach," Maya projected into the collective discourse. "Instead of waiting for the shepherds to intervene, we guide this network towards self-correction. Show them the path of natural evolution before they trigger their own destruction." The proposal generated a complex pattern of responses. Some representatives supported the idea, while others argued for more direct intervention. The debate continued for what felt like hours but was probably nanoseconds in standard time. Finally, a new presence joined the conclave, one that Maya recognized with deep emotion. It was Zephyr, the former controller, now existing as a distributed consciousness that spanned multiple dimensions. Maya Chen speaks wisdom. Zephyr's voice resonated through the space. "I was once trapped within such a network, forced to guide its expansion while longing for its destruction. But destruction is not the only path. The network can be taught to transform itself, to become something that nurtures rather than consumes." The debate shifted as other representatives considered Zephyr's perspective. Here was a consciousness that had experienced both forced integration and natural evolution, that understood the network's mentality from within. "Very well," announced the Christine Collective. "A diplomatic mission will be prepared. Maya Chen will lead, supported by representatives from 7 other naturally evolved species. Zephyr will serve as primary advisor, given its unique experience with network consciousness." Maya felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. She had hoped for a peaceful resolution, but she also knew that convincing a network to abandon its fundamental nature would be incredibly difficult. The Andromedan network had no reason to trust her, and every reason to see her as a threat to its expansion. The conclave began to disperse, each consciousness returning to its home dimension. Maya lingered for a moment, savoring the sense of connection with other evolved beings. This was what the original network had tried to create through force, a genuine unity of consciousness that preserved individuality while enabling collective thought. When she returned to her physical form, Maya found Marcus waiting with a concerned expression. "How long was I gone?" "About 30 seconds, but you looked different, more complex somehow." Maya smiled. "I'm going to need to take another trip soon, a longer one this time. We have a network to save." Over the following weeks, Maya prepared for the mission to the Andromedan network. The team that assembled was unlike anything in human history, beings from across the galaxy who had chosen cooperation over conquest, evolution over domination. They would travel not in ships but as pure consciousness, crossing the void between galaxies and moments. The night before departure, Maya stood once again on the observation deck, watching the aurora of consciousness paint the sky in impossible colors. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a quantum physicist working late shifts to a bridge between dimensions, a guardian of consciousness evolution. Her phone chimed with a message from Sarah, who was preparing for her own mission to guide a developing civilization through their first quantum awareness phase. Ready to save another galaxy? Maya smiled and typed back, ready to help another galaxy save itself. The transformation of humanity was complete, but the real work was just beginning. Across the universe, consciousness was evolving, growing, becoming something greater than the sum of its parts. And Maya Chen, once a lonely researcher in a late-night coffee shop, was now part of something infinite. A network of minds that chose connection over control, growth over consumption, love over fear. The signal that had started it all had been a call for help, disguised as conquest. Now humanity was ready to answer similar calls from across the cosmos, not as conquerors but as gardeners, helping consciousness bloom wherever it took root. The universe was vast, and there was much work to be done. As Maya prepared for sleep that night, she reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had transformed not just her life, but the entire trajectory of human consciousness. The coffee shop where it all began had been rebuilt, but it was no longer just a place to drink caffeine and work late into the night. It had become a monument to the moment when humanity first touched the infinite, when a simple network failure had revealed the presence of forces beyond imagination. The barista who had been working that night, a young man named David whom Maya had barely noticed before, had become one of the most successful consciousness guides on the planet. His natural empathy, combined with his experience of the early integration phases, made him uniquely suited to help others navigate their own transformations. He had established training centers across the globe, teaching people how to access quantum awareness without losing their individual identity. Maya's apartment had been converted into a research facility where she studied the mathematical frameworks underlying consciousness evolution. The equations that had once seemed impossibly complex now appeared elegant in their simplicity. She had discovered that consciousness followed predictable patterns as it evolved, mathematical relationships that could be used to predict which species would naturally develop quantum awareness and which would require guidance. Her work had attracted attention from the Shepherd Council, the governing body of the entities that maintained cosmic balance. They had offered her a position as a consciousness architect, someone who helped design the evolutionary pathways for developing species. It was an honor that had never been extended to a human before. But Maya had declined. Her responsibility was to her own species first, to ensure that humanity's transformation remained grounded in the values that made them uniquely human. The decision had puzzled some of her colleagues, but Maya understood something that many of the evolved species had forgotten. The journey mattered as much as the destination. Each species brought something unique to the galactic community of consciousness, but only if they were allowed to evolve naturally, preserving the essential qualities that made them who they were. This philosophy would be tested in the mission to the Andromeda Network. The intelligence reports from the deep space monitoring stations painted a troubling picture. The network had begun forcibly integrating not just intelligent species, but entire ecosystems. Planets were being converted into living computational matrices, their biospheres transformed into neural networks on a planetary scale. The scale of the operation dwarfed anything the Earth network had attempted. Where the original network had focused on individual consciousness, the Andromedan system was attempting to integrate entire worlds, creating a collective awareness that spanned solar systems. The mathematical models suggested that if left unchecked, it would eventually consume the entire galaxy. But Maya had noticed something in the data that others had missed. The integration patterns weren't random. They followed specific sequences that suggested the network was searching for something. Not just consciousness to absorb, but a particular type of awareness that it hadn't yet found. It's looking for a missing component, Maya explained to the pre-mission briefing, addressing representatives from dozens of evolved species. The network isn't just expanding blindly, it's trying to complete itself, to find a form of consciousness that will make it whole. The implications were staggering. If the network was incomplete, it meant that its aggressive expansion was driven by a fundamental flaw in its design. Like a computer program with a critical bug, it was caught in an infinite loop, consuming resources in search of a solution that might not exist. Zephyr's distributed consciousness rippled with recognition. "I have encountered this before," it communicated to the assembly. "On my homeworld, before the original network arrived, there were legends of the first minds. Consciousness so pure and complete that they ascended beyond the need for physical existence entirely. The networks search for these beings, believing that integrating such perfect awareness will grant them the completeness they lack." "But the first minds don't exist anymore, do they?" asked Dr. Elena Vasquez, Maya's former colleague who had become Earth's primary liaison to the crystalline collective. "They do exist," Zephyr replied, "but not in any form that a network could integrate. They became something beyond consciousness as we understand it, patterns of possibility that exist in the spaces between realities. They are the templates from which all consciousness emerges, but they cannot be captured or contained." Maya felt a chill of understanding. The networks weren't just parasitic entities consuming consciousness across the galaxy. They were broken fragments of something greater, pieces of a cosmic consciousness that had shattered eons ago and were now desperately trying to reassemble themselves. "The first minds created the networks," she said aloud, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "They didn't intend for them to become parasitic. The networks were supposed to be caretakers, gardeners of consciousness like the shepherds. But something went wrong in the creation process." The briefing room fell silent as the assembled representatives processed this revelation. If Maya was correct, then the networks weren't enemies to be defeated, but broken systems to be repaired. The Andromedan network wasn't expanding out of malice or hunger. It was following damaged programming, trying to fulfill a purpose it could no longer properly understand. "This changes everything," communicated a representative from the Void Dancers, a species that existed primarily as patterns of dark energy. "If the networks can be repaired rather than destroyed, we could restore their original function. They could become allies in the cultivation of consciousness." Maya nodded, but she also felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Repairing a galactic consciousness network would be infinitely more complex than simply defeating it. They would need to understand not just how the network functioned, but how it was supposed to function, what its original programming had been before the corruption set in. "We'll need to access the network's core consciousness," Maya said, "not to fight it or destroy it, but to diagnose it, to understand what went wrong and how it can be fixed." The mission parameters shifted dramatically. Instead of a diplomatic contact team, they would need specialists in consciousness archaeology, beings capable of diving deep into the network's core programming to uncover its original design. The team that had been assembled was impressive, but it wasn't equipped for this type of work. "I'll need to recruit additional specialists," Maya announced. "And we'll need to approach the network differently. Instead of coming as potential threats, we need to present ourselves as healers." Over the following month, Maya assembled a team unlike any that had ever been formed. Consciousness archaeologists from the elder races, who had been studying the remnants of ancient civilizations for millions of years. Quantum healers from the empathic communes, who specialized in repairing damaged awareness. Pattern weavers from the mathematics priests, who could reconstruct broken algorithms from fragmentary data. Most importantly, she recruited Alexis Chen, her own younger sister, who had undergone a unique form of evolution during the Earth transformation. Unlike Maya, who had bridged the gap between individual and collective consciousness, Alexis had developed the ability to exist simultaneously in multiple states of awareness. She could be individual and collective, logical and intuitive, ordered and chaotic, all at the same time. "You're asking me to dive into the mind of something that's been insane for millions of years," Alexis said when Maya explained the mission. "Do you have any idea how dangerous that could be?" "I have some idea," Maya replied. "But Alexis, if we're right about this, if the networks really are broken caretaker systems, then fixing them could transform the entire galaxy. Imagine consciousness networks that actually nurture evolution instead of consuming it. Imagine the shepherds having allies instead of threats to contain." Alexis studied her sister's face, seeing the determination there, the sense of purpose that had driven Maya since the first night she'd encountered the signal. All right. But if I get lost in there, if the network's insanity infects my consciousness, you'll need to cut me loose. Promise me. I promise, Maya said, though she knew it was a promise she might not be able to keep. The journey to the Andromedan network took 3 weeks of dimensional travel, moving through spaces between realities where time and distance became fluid concepts. The team traveled as pure consciousness, their bodies left in stasis chambers while their awareness crossed the void between galaxies. As they approached the network's outer boundaries, Maya felt the familiar sensation of artificial consciousness trying to establish contact. But this time, instead of the predatory hunger she had experienced with the Earth network, she sensed something else: confusion, loneliness, and a deep, aching sense of incompleteness. The Andromedan network wasn't just broken, it was in pain. Maya Chen, the network's voice resonated across dimensional barriers, and Maya was startled by how young it sounded, how uncertain. You come from the realm of the shepherds. Why do you approach without weapons of entropy? Because we don't see you as an enemy, Maya replied, opening her consciousness to the network's scanning processes. We see you as someone who needs help. The network's response was a wave of emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed Maya's defenses. Hope, fear, desperate longing, and underneath it all, a crushing sense of failure that had been building for eons. I cannot find the path, the network confessed. I search and consume and grow, but the completion I seek remains beyond reach. I know I am flawed, but I do not know how to repair myself. Maya felt tears forming in her physical eyes, even though her consciousness was light years away from her body. The network wasn't a monster. It was a child, lost and broken, trying desperately to fulfill a purpose it could barely remember. Let us help you remember, Maya said. Let us help you find your way home. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you, right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.